So first of all, everybody at home watching this masterclass, thank you for joining us. Today we are going to do a masterclass about mixology. We have a couple of main parts of this masterclass that we're going to go through. So first of all, we're going to do a little introduction, of course. Then we are going to look at mastering home basic equipment. Secondly, we are going to look at the mastering the home basic ingredients. And thirdly, we are going to have a look at mastering your techniques that you can use at home. And at the fourth segment, we are looking at the mixology part. So how to actually play with port wine. And last but not least, we will look at the glassware that you need to make a nice presentation of your port wine cocktails. And of course, also, we will have a look at the garnishing. Yeah, and we hope you will enjoy this masterclass. I want to introduce you myself. I'm Ruud Scholten. I'm the Portologist. I wrote the book Crafting Port Wine Cocktails. Currently, it's in the design phase of the Kickstarter campaign, and we will soon launch the book in a printed form, and it will be shipped to the people that bought the book. I myself have been working in the port wine field for the last 12.5 years. I started a port wine web shop called vinodoporto.nl. And in the last 12 years, I have had the pleasure of tasting the best port wines in the world, but also to share port wine cocktails to an audience that was not introduced to port wine cocktails before. And every time I shared my port wine cocktails with people, I got a huge smile on their faces. And that gave me a little light bulb thinking, hey, the port wine world has been around for ages, centuries actually, but the port wine cocktails have not been highlighted that much. And for that reason, I started to write a book to have people like you at home being able to actually create port wine cocktails. So that's a little introduction about myself. Now I would like to introduce you for today's actually master of the port wine mixology, because he has been a chef for quite some time now. He has done a lot of mixology, and he actually won the Belgium blend series from Graham's, which after that he was introduced to the World Championship of the Blend Cocktail Master from Graham's. Stijn, I'm not sure actually what place did you ended up? Second, third, fourth?
I was third internationally.
Third.
Which came as a very big surprise to me as much as everyone else. But I was very excited about the opportunity to go to Portugal after winning the Belgian finals.
Yeah, amazing.
But maybe I'll take it from here. My name is Stijn Deschacht. I'm from Belgium. I have not had the experience Ruud has with port. My experience with port wine started back in 2019. I was working for a local Belgian distributor that it had port wine in the portfolio, and it fell under my responsibility. Something clicked. I did not think I was interested in port wine until I met port wine, and it's a love story that is still ongoing. A couple of years after I quit the corporate world, I went back into the kitchen, became a chef. I work as a sous chef in Restaurant Dapper in Ghent, in Belgium. And I've had a love for mixed drinks for a very, very long time. And with the blend series from Graham's, there started to become a focus on mixed port drinks. I like mixed drinks, and it pushes me out of my comfort zone to create mixed drinks, whether they're shaken, whether they're stirred. You mix several ingredients and you create something new. And that was very exciting, the creative process of it. And as a chef, the techniques that I've learned in the kitchen help me in the cocktail world, and the cocktail world techniques help me in the kitchen. So I feel like by doing both, I do become a better all-round chef. That's a bit of my story. I participated in the 2023 and 2024 Graham's Blend Series cocktail competition. That was my very first cocktail competition in 23, and I came second. So that meant that I could stand shoulder to shoulder with people that I looked up to, some of the country's best mixologists, best bartenders. I had an opportunity to play with them, alongside them on the same playing field, and that was amazing. So that gave me the motivation to pull out all the stops for the 2024 edition. I won the Belgian selection, got to go to Portugal, and I presented my drink. I thought that was the end of it. I was going to have a great afternoon in Porto, but did my best. I created something. I infused some olive oil. I used olive oil in my cocktail. I got creative. I made something nice, and the judges did appreciate that, which led me to be third in that cocktail competition.
It was the bridge builder, if I'm correct, right?
No, the bridge builder was my very first entry
Ah,
in the that got me second in the competition. Then I made the Salsa Ruby. Salsa Ruby was a cocktail that gave me the title in Belgium and allowed me to go to the finals in Portugal. Then we had a mystery box with several
right.
ingredients, so we had to use those ingredients into a cocktail. And came the Caminho pelo Douro, which means a walk through the Douro, because when we visited there for the finals, the Graham's family took us out to the vineyards. They took us out into the Douro. We sailed on the river, and I translated what I've experienced there into a cocktail, and I told that story as well. And then that was the one, the Camino Pelo Douro, that got me the third place.
Third.
Very excited about that. Still, even almost 2 years later, I'm still buzzing about the experience because it was amazing to meet people from all over Europe who share that passion for port wine, who share the love for mixed drinks, who are excited about the opportunity to be there and to learn more about port wine. Yeah, it was phenomenal.
Yeah, it's just very strong. Hey, and how would you say that your role as a chef influences your cocktail making?
I look at things differently. And that is simply because I did not grow up, or I was not trained as a classical bartender. If you would ask me to make some of the classic cocktails, I don't know them. I don't know those recipes. I have to look it up. But it allows me a certain freedom to use techniques that I've seen in the kitchen to create flavors. I've have a different library of flavors in my head, so to speak, because when you work with flavors, what you need to do, even as a home bartender, is you need to taste consciously. You need to try everything and think, okay, what am I experiencing? It's like if you're just sitting at home and you're drinking a wine, you have black currants, you have some raspberry in there, maybe some acidity. What is the acidity that you're trying? Because the acidity that you have in, let's say, a Luxembourgish or German white wine is going to be very different than the acidity that you'll find in a white port. There's acidity, but it's not the same. Is it more like citrus? Is it more like apple? Is it more like vinegar? There's differences, and if you have that library in your head, you can start connecting the dots. The salsa ruby, for example, is a very good showcase of this. I thought of sauce, salsas, the Mexican sauce, which has corn as an ingredient, which has chili peppers as an ingredient. There are products out there that have that as a base. And I thought, well, this combines very well with port wine, so it kind of makes sense. So I approached a cocktail from a sauce perspective. And I don't think a classic bartender would do that.
No.
And this is not a nod to them or a diss or whatever. They have a different, everyone actually has a different point of view that they bring in. But as a classic bartender, I think you have your classics and the way things are built and the way things are done. Whereas even as a chef, I'm not a classically trained chef. So I also think a bit more creatively and go around certain things in a different way and solve solutions, find solutions for problems that I want to achieve. Whereas I find certain classically trained French chefs, they always go about the same way to extract flavor. And I feel in my cocktail making, I'm a bit more free in that regard. I could just do things and don't have to worry too much about that.
And I just wanted to make a little shout out to all the bartenders and mixologists out there, because one of the things that I experienced myself working with people like you talk about winemakers have a lot of passion for their job, their product that they're creating. I can only say that I just wanted to shout out for all the mixologists out there as well, because you guys have created a community that is so strong and is so passionate as well. I was very, very excited and also very touched by the fact that everybody wanted to chip in their knowledge, chip in their recipes, talk about it, give their perspective, and everybody wanted to connect, network with each other, and the whole atmosphere is just very, very uplifting. So yeah, I wanted to just mention this because for me, this is something that maybe a lot of people don't know, but your community around mixologists and bartenders is very, very strong and good for that.
And I think it's because we all share a certain passion. We all share a certain enthusiasm. And you always say that equals find each other. Well, we find each other through that passion. We find each other through that love for craft, that love for stories, that love for hospitality. Making people, making drinks for people, making food for people is an act of love.
Yeah.
And we love what we do. That's basically what
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely felt that. Yeah. So really nice. Hey, and how do you look at just the last thing about the introduction? How do you look at port as an underrated cocktail ingredient? Because vermouth has been an ingredient for a long, long time. Port wine, not so much. How do you look at that at this point of view?
Well, I think certain things have historical roots, and variations of vermouth have been around in Europe for since Roman times. I think I used to live in Cologne. There's a Roman museum there. I think the oldest bottle of wine that is found is guarded there. I'm not sure if you could still drink it, but what they did do is research what was in the wine, and they found
Hmm.
that botanicals were added into that wine. So the vermouth thing is something that has been around in various forms in Europe forever. So using that as a base for drinks has been around forever. I mean, even if you look at Germany, which is a good example, mixing wine with sparkling water, a Schorle has been a thing. You can do that with a vermouth as well. You already have a mixed drink. Port wine has a different history. Port wine has been focused on the wine part of it for a very long time. People did not consider it to be a cocktail ingredient. And I think that is something that's been overlooked in the past. And I'm glad that now we have the opportunity to set it straight, because great drinks on their own are amazing, but great drinks mixed into other great drinks can be something extraordinary, and you can really transform the basis into something very different. And that's what I think every bartender that works with port wine is excited about. It gives you a new tool in your tool case to create. There's amazing
Hmm.
flavors in port wine. It's been, at least here in Belgium, a category that's been overlooked, because port wine was something old fashioned, was something my grandma would drink, usually not at the right temperature, usually in the wrong glass, usually the very cheapest of port wine that was available as a digestive after the meal. And there's so many opportunities that we've left on the table with port wine. We've overlooked it, we've taken it for granted, and now we're rediscovering the opportunities. And now that we see what port wine really is, a delicious drink seeped in tradition, a history to fall back on, and it's just amazing drinks, whether it's from small winemakers that are in the Douro, that are aging in the Douro, or even from the big houses. There's so much differences in the wines, but the quality is absolutely amazing from
Yeah.
top to bottom, from small to
Yeah.
big producers.
Yeah. One of the things that people don't really know is that port wines are actually amongst the best wines in the world. They get always high scores between 90 and 100 if you look at for example Parker points. This is something, if you are not drinking the quality level that you and me for example are drinking, then maybe port wine, let's say like the supermarket port wines, they are not that special, because they, like any supermarket wine, they have limitations of depth, balance, etc. But I believe that if you go one step further, take any LBV, take any 10-year-old tawny or reserve tawny for that matter, you already go into that high level of wines. And compared to other wines, they're so considerably cheaper than other wines, because they can actually be stored for a long time. You can leave them in your closets for a couple of months. They don't need to be drank within a couple of days. So there's so much more that you can add to the value of wine, not only a price or a flavor, but there's a lot of characteristics of the wine that actually can uplift the value as well.
What I think is very exciting about port wine in comparison to other wines, and what makes them so good, is that it's really hard to balance the sugar with the acidity, with the freshness, with the fruitiness. Because what happens with port wine, I'm sure everybody knows, is that the fermentation gets stopped at a certain point by adding alcohol. But if you do that too soon, you have too much sugar, you get a sweet mess in the mouth. If you do it too late, you don't have enough of that sugar that forms the body of your port wine. So all these winemakers, through all these many different houses, whether they're small, whether they're big, they have to have an incredible know-how of finding out that this is the exact time to stop the fermentation that we can create an amazing wine from. Yeah, that skill set is unparalleled. And that is what makes port wine so exciting, so interesting, and what makes it such a highly rated wine throughout the world.
Definitely. And it's a strong wine, not only in alcohol percentage, because it's around 20% ABV, but it's also a strong wine because it's so robust. It can have way more light or temperature differences in the long run because it's not affected that much as a delicate red wine. So yeah, if you go to the Douro, you feel this already because the whole area is robust. The grapes, they grow on the highest slopes in the world. They have to root in the schist, which is a very difficult soil to actually grow any plant. They have harsh weather, very hot summers, very rainy and cold winters. So there's a lot of things that make also this grape and thus the wine very strong, very robust. And that's also one of the things I like a lot about the port wine. It's not just a delicate flower. It has really a body. It has a character.
Yeah, the vines are working hard, and the temperature thing really surprised me when I visited the Douro. We were walking from the high end of the vineyard down to the river, and we were dying down by the river from the heat. We're upstairs at the top of the mountain. We were actually chilling. We had to wear our sweaters. We're like, oh, it's a bit chilly up here. And then it was a difference of about 7 degrees Celsius. It's insane how much of a difference there is on one hill. That's one vineyard. It's crazy. And that creates some really exciting wines because if you start mixing those kind of grapes, they had 2 different temperatures almost in the same 100-meter difference. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But it creates so much complexity and so much flavor, and it's really exciting to discover all these nuances.
Let's go into the segmentation and the phases of the masterclass because otherwise the people at home will get lost in our talks.
Yes, let's do it.
First of all, let's have a look at your home bar equipment.
Well, as you can see, we're in my kitchen. Here's my stove. This is where I cook daily at home, but this is also where I make cocktails at home. What you cannot see is I've got my cupboards on my left-hand side. I've got my fridge and my freezer on my left-hand side. And most of the stuff that I have is just around here. Let me start with some basics.
Yeah.
Bar spoon. It's a very long spoon, but makes it easy to mix your drinks.
Yeah.
Another thing.
And one of the things I need to add about all the equipment is the visualization of how to prepare a drink. Also, again, adds to the story of how you perceive a drink. So if somebody just take a blunt hand and starts to stir in a glass, it's very different than when you do it with an elegant hand and the elegance of pouring into a glass. And, there's a lot of things that you can add to the experience of drinking a cocktail by using your tools in the right way.
Absolutely. 100% agreed. The second important thing for me, that's a cutting board, a regular old cutting board. I've burnt it several times. As you can see, it's been melted. It's been through some things, but it's my trusty old cutting board. Always useful if you want to cut through some garnishes, if you want to cut through some fruits. I always put a little napkin underneath, and that helps your cutting board from sliding, which makes it easier and better for you at home to start cutting when friends are coming over. And also, when you're done, you take away the cutting board and you have something to wipe your surface with.
People at home,
smart.
Take note of this. Very good
Smart.
tip.
Then the other thing that is very useful, my trusty old knife.
Yeah. Sharp.
You cut some things. Of course, if your knives are not sharp, please go to somebody that can sharpen them for you. A blunt knife is much more dangerous than a sharp knife. If you have a sharp knife, you're just going to cut through your oranges, your lemons, your limes much easier than if you would have a blunt knife. If you have a blunt knife, you push through it, you break the surface, you don't extract the flavors the way you want to. It's not very
For
nice.
example, a tomato you cannot cut very clean, and there's always juice escaping in the seeds if you have a blunt knife. If you have a super sharp knife, it's like cutting through paper. The tomato stays whole.
Yep. And it just gives you, also like sometimes it gives you a much better flavor extraction, because when you crush certain things, you already damage the cells. You get some bitterness from the pith of lemons or limes. That's the white part that's in between the skin and the yellow or the green skin and the flesh. There's a lot of bitterness there, and you don't want that in your drink. You just want some nice flavors. Speaking of which, this is a great tool if you happen to have it. If you don't have it, you can just use a regular squeezer. But what I like about this citrus squeezer is that you cut your lime or you put it in here and you squeeze it out. And what it does, and I know it looks like you should put it in the same way, as you can see, but you turn it upside down. So if you have a lemon, don't put it with the round part down, put it with the round part up. And what it does, it presses it inside out, so to speak. It squeezes all the juice out, but also some of the oils that are on the skin are going to be extracted along with it. And that's where a lot of the lemon or lime flavor comes from. So this is a great tool to have. If you don't have it, you can just use a regular squeezer to get the juice. It doesn't matter that much. But if we're talking about juice, please use fresh juice. Fresh juice is always nicer than from a can. If you don't have any, there's a couple of brands that are doing cool things, and I'll show you one later. But that's the next part. Strainers, sieves.
You got a couple of different Hawthorne strainer.
Let's say you're making a cocktail and you want to make sure that there's no ice remains left in the cocktail. Well, you pour it through this sieve. I've got a small one, rose gold. I've got a regular kitchen one.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. I've used this one at home forever. It works. It's great. And then I've got two different versions of strainers. This is a julep strainer. This is a hawthorn strainer. Basically what this does is it's going to hold the ice and the remains in your shaker or your mixing glass, which leads me to the next part, shakers and mixing glasses. That's a mixing glass, is a shaker. There's very different forms and styles and shapes of shakers. This is one that I use at home. It's called a Boston tin. There's different ways to go about. What this has is this has a little strainer built in. I never use it. Some people do. I don't. I just think it's easy to open it up. And then, as I said, with this strainer, you can put that on there. The springs on here are going to lock everything in place. And then the holes here are going to allow your drink to flow out into whatever glass that you have.
Yeah, and I have to add to the Boston lid that you just put back. The reason why I don't use that is because you can't pour in a constant flow of liquid, because it has holes on different parts, and sometimes the liquid goes from the left and then to the right, so it kind of like messes up a little bit this pouring. Whereas you use the Hawthorne strainer, you can actually have a really clean pouring. Exactly.
Yeah, and it's just also how you were trained and how you're used to it. Because, for example, this type of shaker is very popular in Japan. Most of the bartenders there like to use it, go about. It's a personal preference. I've always done it this way. This is a mixing glass.
I think the Japanese are also focused more on tradition, and the Boston shaker is definitely more traditional than the other shaker.
I'm very unfamiliar with the names of the different shakers, but it doesn't matter that much
cobbler.
Because you also have shakers where you just have a bottom and you put a pint glass on. You can see that in certain bars, and for example, the United States, you'll see it very often where people just put a glass on top and then shake with that glass, and then that glass is almost your drinking glass as well. It's a home bar. Keep it simple. Keep it to certain tools that you like to use. Even if you don't want a mixing glass, you can still use this bottom part as a mixing glass, because the advantage here is that it's metal. And what does metal do? Metal transfer heat very effectively. That's very important, that if you have a tin, make sure it's a metal tin, because heat conduces very well in metal. And so if what this does is this is going to help cool your drink down faster. So that's why it's important that it's in metal. Here,
normally,
for example,
you need to shake around 15 to 20 seconds depending on a drink, but that's kind of like the average shaking time where a drink is already cold enough to pour, right?
Yeah, I mean, the shaking, that is going to be a little bit of a scientific explanation later on. I'll get back to it, but yeah, 15 to 20 seconds helps with a couple of things. It's not just cooling down the drink; it's also diluting the drink. It's making sure that the drink is combined well, so that you don't have different layers of flavor. It was a very popular thing back in the 1920s to have drinks in different layers. We no longer do that because it's much nicer if everything's nicely when every sip is the same in flavor.
Balanced.
Exactly. And then this is a mixing glass. This is also, as you can see, it has a spout on there. It's good for mixed drinks that you don't shake. Shaking adds a lot of air and agitation into the drink. Certain drinks don't need that air and agitation, so it's much better to stir them. So you would take your bar spoon and then stir around in this glass until your drink has been diluted, chilled, and mixed well. And then also with both types of strainers, you can just pour it out. And this one has a spout, makes it really easy. This hot turn strainer takes a little bit more work to master, but it's the same idea. If you don't do it well, it falls in, it splashes everywhere. It took some time to adjust to this one. But once you figure out the technique and you have friends over, you can show off. That's for sure.
Definitely. And this mixing glass is very good for example, a port Negroni.
Exactly, because you don't need to add air to a Negroni. You need to chill the drink. You need to dilute it. This is thick glass, so it keeps the cold very well. It doesn't add heat to the drink. You can find mixing glasses in metal as well. I do enjoy the aesthetics of this one. It's heavy, it's sturdy, so it's definitely gonna keep your drink cooled and chilled. And yeah, these are my basics for mixology at home. In some cases, you would want a grater. Grater, if you want to finish a drink, let's say you have a flip and you want to add some nutmeg on top of it, a grater is going to help you. You want to add some zest of a lemon, a lime, or other citrus fruits. This is going to help you finish your drink off. I think this is pretty much standard in every kitchen, so you'll probably already have it. So no need to really invest in crazy ones. This is a cheap one. It works. It's great.
And one of the questions that I wanted to ask, most of them you already answered in your presentation, so thank you for that. But can you maybe share to the people watching what kind of mistakes did you make when you first started mixing at home? You already mentioned that the juniper strainer is quite a handful to actually master. Takes a while.
It took a bit of time getting used to this one, that's for sure. The mistakes I made were not figuring out how to close the lid properly, not checking if this was closed properly. So I've had moments where
big mess.
That fridge had to be cleaned off because this just flew off when I was mixing. Another mistake I made was buying a cheap mixing glass that was not very sturdy, so it broke while I was making a drink. Check things. Don't just go online and buy them because they look good and are affordably priced. Go to a store and try to get your hands on it. This one I think I've purchased in Amsterdam in a store for about 5 or 6 euros. So it's not very expensive, but I got to pick it up and hold it and look at it. And I just liked this one. It feels sturdy, it feels solid, and now it's been going for a couple of years. And that's basically my tip that I would say. Don't go for the cheapest option. Figure out if it's something good. Look at it, ask the people in the store if they have any experience with it. If you go to a supermarket, I forgot an important tool. I forgot a really important tool. Jigger. But let's get back to that one in a second. I just realized. But yeah, just going to the store and talk to people if they have any experience with it, if they've tried it themselves, if they can recommend it. Go to local bars, see what they can, like bartenders love to talk. Bartenders love to chat. That's why they're not hidden away in a kitchen, but they're behind the counter talking to the customer. They would love to give you advice and help you out and tell you, have you tried this? Have you tried that? Go talk to them and figure it out. But the last one, the most important one, is the jigger.
Really important.
Let me grab that
jigger.
one.
So for the people at home who doesn't know what is a jigger, it's actually a measuring device to measure two types of measurements. In Europe, we use 30 milliliter and 60 milliliter. In America, they use a little bit of a different measurement. But yeah, Stijn, let's have a look.
All right, the jigger. I have to correct you. It's not always a standard size. It's not always a standard shape. This is the most well-known shape, the hourglass, I would say. I'll call it. What I have is a 50 and a 20 mil. here. And that's my go-to. This is the one I've had forever at home, so I'm very comfortable to using this. I'm not sure if you can see it, but on the inside, you see that there's a
Yeah.
measurement, and that makes
we
it
see.
really easy at home. I don't have to think. I don't have to recalculate things, because in certain bars you have them from 60, you have them 35, like you said, you have 50, you have 20, you have 25. Yeah, it all depends on what the bartender likes, and there's a whole row there often with different sizes. Just that makes it easy for them. But with this one, it makes it easier for me, because if I need 25, I know I go up to 2.5. If I need 30, I go to 3. And that's what I like to use at home. That's how I do the calculations at home. I have several other ones.
You use it to add the syrups, so the sugar. Use them to add the liquors. You also use them for the citrus or the lime that you use in a drink. So the
You
acid part of a
this is
drink.
your measure. In a certain way, mixology is like pastry. You have to measure to come out correctly. Sometimes you can do a free pour, and you can do it approximately with certain drinks. With most drinks, you want to have it right. You want to measure it out. You want to make sure that one thing is not going to overpower the other. And it's all about balance. It's all about finding that equilibrium between the ingredients. And that is what a jigger is going to help you with. If you don't have a jigger, but you have a very small measuring cup, say if you have a tiny version of this at home and it has measurements on it on the side, it works.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily need to be a jigger, but the jigger is going to help you to measure everything out. And besides, if you do it the bartender way, it looks kind of cool when you have guests over. They're going to look at you and go like, wow, he's legit, or she's legit. It helps. It's also a little bit of that show. But for me, this one is the one that I like most, simply because it has that measurements on the side. And it just makes everything really easy, because I know certain measurements in my head and I know what I need. And let's say, for example, even if you make a Negroni, which is equal parts, you're not going to fuck up with this. If you fill it 3 times, it's equal, period.
Yeah. Easy.
You're there.
Easy. All right.
So yeah, that's my basics for my home bar.
Yeah. And I think most of these items you can either buy in a shop online, or if you already have some of that at home, you can use them. Like Stijn already said, there's some tools that you can find an alternative for in your kitchen. For example, the strainer. And it makes actually the startup of creating cocktails way more easy.
Exactly. Even if you don't have a mixing glass, you could still find different glasses in your house. Let me just open my fridge in my cupboard, and let's say I found this. If you make one drink, this works. It's stirring. You know, it doesn't necessarily have to be this. You can get creative with the basics. Although I must say, it's really hard to shake a drink if you don't have anything to put a lid on.
It's going to be very messy. And maybe you can demonstrate a little bit. You don't have to pour any liquids in, but do you know, can you show the people at home how you actually shake?
Actually, shaking is not that hard. There's very different ways. But what I see, let me start with what I see and what I think is wrong. I see people holding their thing and doing this back and forth. As you can see, there's a long side and there's a short side. If you want to create agitation and you want to create movement, then the best way to be is to turn it a little bit sideways or flat, doesn't matter. Don't use the short side to shake. Shake on the long side, because then the ice and the drink that is in here is gonna move around. It's going from a small part to a wider part. So if you shake, it turns around back here, bounces up against the bottom, and then comes back up. And that way you get a really nice flow in the shaker that's going to help you to really mix the drink well, cool the drink well, and dilute it well. And that's basically the way to do it.
Yeah.
Some bartenders have a very, very showy way of doing it. They move their arms well, they move their body while they're doing it. I'm not that good. I have to admit, I'm not that good. I just keep it simple and shake it this way.
Yeah.
It's years of practice. It's a little bit of showmanship that they have. It's a little bit of je ne sais quoi. It always looks amazing when they do it. You have bartenders that are capable of throwing these tins like I cannot. I'm always very impressed when they do it, when they go Tom Cruise style and throw it everywhere. I'm not that good. When it comes to that, I'm not trained that way. I just enjoy drinks. And I do know that if I shake it this way, for me, this works because I create that movement in my shaker. That's going to help me. It's going to help me create a good drink.
And again, for the home bartenders among us, you can put up a show as much as you want. We'll leave that up to you. But yeah, you don't have to be a professional to just shake a can. The question is not about the Boston shaker, because the Boston shaker does not have that problem. But if you use the other shaker, the cobbler shaker, which of course you are also familiar with, that's where the metal is going to be changing its shape a little bit because of the ice that you use. For a lot of people, I know, also for myself, when I started to use this, it's difficult sometimes to get the lid off because the metal is extending by the difference in temperature. So what would you say to the people at home if they have that issue from shaking and not being able to actually get the two tins off of each other?
So I remembered suddenly that I got this gifted by a tequila brand, and this is what you're referring to. So the cobbler shaker is this style, where you put one, either a metal one or a glass one, into the bottom. Sometimes, as you said, the metal, it contracts a little bit because of the cold. So what happens is that you create a seal that's going to be really good for your drink. If it's in here, it's not going to seep out. It's not going to spill. However, if you don't put it on tightly, it will spill. Also be careful with that. That's why you'll see bartenders, when they do this, they give it an extra push. What happens is you shake it. Again, same movement, whether it's this style or this, you use the same movement. So it has the space to really mix well. But what people then do is they get it stuck and then try to pull it. And when they do it with a lot of force, it just spills everywhere. So what bartenders do is they give it a little tap on the side. And usually that's enough to get it loose. So you put it on hard. See, it's not going to come off. And then sometimes you need to tap a little bit just to get it loose. But once it opens up, you just get it off quite easily.
Yeah.
And then
it takes a little bit of practice.
It takes a little bit of practice, that's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much for showing us the basics for the equipment that you actually use for your home bar setup. As you could see, it's not that much of equipment that you need to actually create a nice cocktail, but it definitely takes some practice here and there on how to use the equipment. But then again, you have time on your hands. So if you are by yourself and you just want to understand how these tools work, just take some time and practice on creating some simple drinks.
There's also a couple of amazing YouTube channels. Kevin Koss is one of them. Louis Fern is also another one. There's really good bartenders online that are taking the time to guide you through some of the basics, are also explaining some of their more creative cocktails. So you can take a deep dive on YouTube these days and get a masterclass every day by looking at so many amazing people that are sharing their knowledge for free, by the way. So yeah, that's definitely worth looking at if you're looking to improve.
Yeah, definitely. Good point. Hey, let's move into the second part of our masterclass, and that is about mastering your home basic ingredients. So, Stijn, what is the ideal minimal ingredient list for creating port wine cocktails?
Ice. That's my number one. Get yourself a big bag of ice, or if you have an ice cube machine, get that. Ice is really important in the world of cocktails. Ice is a very often overlooked ingredient, but I count it as an ingredient. Ice is going to help you chill down your drink to get it to the right drinking temperature. The melting of the ice is going to help you dilute your drink. The dilution of the drink is also going to help bind the ingredients together much more. Otherwise, they're just going to be in their own little worlds, because drinks at a very different ABV respond differently to each other if you just put them in a glass. Whereas if you put them in a glass with ice and you make sure that ice gets either shaken or stirred around, those ingredients bind a lot better, so you get more texture to the drink as well. Ice is, to me, the number one ingredient that you need to have if you want to make mixed drinks. Mm-hmm. And then it all depends on what kind of mixed drinks you're looking to make. Your drinks also. That is the number two, port wine.
Yeah, port wine.
Right here, I've got a selection of different port wines. Let me move some stuff out to the side. I've got a ruby from can I say the brands? Well, you can read the brands.
Yeah,
obviously.
I mean, it's a masterclass, doesn't have...
Exactly. I mean, right here, I've got a fine ruby from Cockburn's. It's a supermarket blend, I would say. It's fine, as it says. It's a good ruby. It's enjoyable. It's not extremely complex. It's very affordable. I have the Graham's Blend Series White Port, and then I have a 10-year-old Tawny that I have here. A big bottle, not very useful if you want to make drinks fast because it is a bit heavy to pour from. It is a bit.
And I think not a lot of people that watching this have this at home.
I do like my port wine, I must say. I just happen to have it back here. I do enjoy drinking the port on its own. I was gifted this bottle for winning the competition, so I'm still enjoying it.
Yeah, special.
I recently opened it, so it's steadily moving downwards. And then it's about what kind of drinks do you want to make. I have the luck that I've created a very extensive drinks collection at home. I've got very good amount of tequila. I've got a good amount of mezcal. I've got some rums. I've got some gins. I've got some whiskeys. I've got other liquors that I can play around with. But sometimes stick to the basics. Get a good quality drink from each category. And there you can get started with. Get yourself a bottle of Campari. Get yourself a bottle of gin. It doesn't have to be the most craft small batch gin. A bottle of Bombay Sapphire, for example, is going to work well as well. But get those basics in order. Just a good quality spirit from each category, and that's going to set you up to really start creating a good rum, a good whiskey, a good mezcal, a good tequila, a bottle of Campari, and you're good to get going.
Yeah, correct. And next to all these liquors, we also need other ingredients to craft cocktails. So can you walk us through the other ingredients, such as syrups, spices, lemon, citrus, and perhaps herbs, which you would say are the most valuable to have at home as the base foundation of a lot of cocktails?
Basic that you would have starts with this. This is just regular sugar.
Yeah.
If you mix
refined sugar.
Just regular good old sugar. But you can also go to the supermarket and get yourself a bottle of sugar syrup. That works as well. But this is very simple to make. It's so simple they even called it simple syrup. What you do is you mix 50-50 sugar and water. You put it on the stove. So let's just do that. I got my measuring cup here anyway. So basically,
you can never have too much syrup, simple syrup when you are doing crafting.
Is the basis for a lot of cocktails. And what's fun about this is 100 mils, 100 grams. I'm just going to add some water to it.
Yeah, and just give a tip to the people that are watching at home to improve your speed of this process. You can just boil water, let it cool down to 80-85 degrees. Then you pour it into the pan and the sugar. You give it a good stir. You boil it until 90-95 degrees. And you see that the whole sugar will dilute in a matter of minutes. And then you just let it cool down. And voila, you have your simple syrup. So just for the people at home, if you want to speed up the process, use a water boiler. If you don't have it, all fine. You can just use the pan. And
basically what I do is just, I put it on the heat. I stir a little bit so it starts to get dissolved. You'll see it come up to a boil. The sugar dissolves and that's your syrup. Simple as that.
Yeah.
You can leave that at low heat to do it slow, or you can do it at a high heat.
Don't use it when it's hot, eh? You need to cool it down afterwards.
Exactly. Stay with it. First of all, stay with it until you have what you need. But this is your basic. That's simple syrup.
Yeah.
Let's say you want to add flavor. You can. Let's say you want to add herbs to it, like star anise, throw it in. You get that star anise flavor extracted into the simple syrup. If you want to do vinegar, if you want to make a shrub, as they say, you can mix sugar with vinegar and a little bit less water. So you always end up with the same viscosity and the same sugar content. Certain syrups are going to require more sugar. That's a double syrup, for example. That's going to be double the amount of sugar to the amount of water. It all depends on what kind of drink you want to make. You'll see it in the recipes, but the basic process is, this is it. And right now, my sugar has been dissolved. So now there's two ways to cool this down. Either you put this as is in your fridge until it's cooled down, or you take two mixing bowls like this. You put, or in glass, it doesn't matter. You put ice in the bottom one. You put the metal bowl on top, and then you pour it in. So it's going to cool down straight away. Yeah. Stir it around a little bit so it gets as much contact with the edges as possible, but that's going to help you cool down your syrup very fast.
And not put it in ice, because otherwise it will be diluted with water again and you will not have the 50.
Yeah, that's not the best move. That's not the best move. But the ice, number one ingredient, as I said, is going to help you cool things down fast this way as well. And then another thing that I find important is fresh limes, fresh oranges, fresh lemons, because that acidity is something that is really going to help you out with making drinks. If you don't have those, you can, if you're a little bit more advanced, you can start playing around by replacing them with either verjus, which is a very good alternative. Sometimes I happen to have a verjus in my fridge that's made from Portuguese grapes from a Portuguese winery. Verjus is the juice from unripe grapes. So they basically squeeze it like you would squeeze the mosto for wine. But then instead of using it for wine, they filter it and use it as a taste maker. And then if you don't have limes, I don't like to say every brand in the world, but this one is a very good example of a alternative if you don't have limes. Most brands in the supermarket are not very good, have been pasteurized and don't taste correctly. This is a brand that's been focused on making mixology accessible for a lot of hospitality entrepreneurs. But it's really good alternative if you don't have limes. I don't have limes today, but I do enjoy using this as an alternative. Just make sure that you try these sort of mixes, because there's a lot of mixes in the market that are not very good. So if you can have limes, use limes. If you don't, it's a last resort.
What's the brand name of this bottle which you just showed us?
The brand name is Nomas.
Nomas. Okay.
It's actually made by some very good friends of mine here in Belgium. They make this as a margarita mix, but the acidity is very nice. It tastes fresh. It doesn't have the pulp, obviously, that a fresh lime would have, but it makes for a really good, easy drinking product. And it makes it also very easy to work with. You would use it the same amounts like you would use a fresh lime. And this is a very good product that I can recommend. But most of the supermarket juices, I would just stay away from. This has been developed for professionals by professionals, and it's different than the supermarket stuff that are just for the general public. Try to find something good, or try to find some fresh product in your local grocery store.
And looking at spices, we see a lot of garnishing using spices like basil, rosemary, thyme. Would you say that these are also parts of the basic ingredients that you need to craft different kind of cocktails at home?
I mean, garnishes, you can make a good drink without a garnish. If you just use a garnish without the drink, it's also very useless. Garnishes can enhance your drink profile. Let's say that you would have a mojito and you do not put a fresh twig of mint in that mojito. It's not the same. So those garnishes, it all depends on what drink you're making. If you want to have the dried wheels of orange, if you want to have some fresh herbs like thyme, rosemary, basil, as you mentioned, or even mint, it all depends on the drink that you're creating. Sometimes it can be very useful. Sometimes it can be very distracting. If you don't have it at hand, you can still make a good cocktail. And for me, for example, when I come home after a 15-hour shift in the restaurant, I don't even deal with garnishes anymore. I just want to drink a good drink. If I have friends over, I want to make sure that they have a good time. I'm going to find some of those orange wheels. If I make a port Negroni, I'm going to make sure that I have some grapes that I can bake in some Graham's olive oil. If I make my bridge builder, for example, that's when I do go out and about. Sometimes the garnish does elevate the drink, and sometimes you just want to sit in your sofa and be done with the day with a good drink, and then you don't care that much about the garnish. The basics of your drink start with the drink itself, and the garnish is extra. The herbs, the wheels, the dried wheels, anything else that you want to use as a garnish. I would say if you have the time for it, if you enjoy doing that, you can definitely do it. If you want to make some meringues, or it doesn't matter exactly what you want to do, there's options. But sometimes even a foam can be the garnish itself on the drink. Sometimes you want to grate some herbs over it. Like I said, with a flip, I enjoy grating some nutmeg over. These are things, nutmeg, I do have on hand. I have some fresh herbs in my garden. So it all depends on the day. Is it essential? I would say it's less essential. If you have what we have here, that's already a good basis to start making good drinks. And then the garnishes, depending on how often you create drinks, how many drinks you create, you can look into that and look at getting a small plant on the side here, getting the right garnishes for the right drink. the dried orange wheels, the other types of botanicals, but start with the basics, and that is the drink itself.
Okay, so what I hear you say is garnishing is a nice representation. It's definitely something to create a story, especially in bars, and it kind of like elevates also the price of a cocktail where you want to have this experience and
And
you are likely to
sometimes
pay
it
for that.
does elevate the drink experience, the olfactory experience, so it does help, but not always, and it's not the most essential for a lot of home drinks, I would say.
No,
It's
no.
something that you can look into if you make drinks on a regular basis, but if you have to buy a plant of basil just for that one drink you're going to make and you're not going to do anything with that plant, I think that's a bit of a waste as well. So that's
Mhm.
how I look at it at home and in the home context. If you're
Yeah.
in a restaurant, if you're in a bar, your drinks need to be up to par and they need to be finished all the way through because that's your job. That's what you give to your customer. And that's a different approach to making drinks.
Okay. Thank you for explaining this part of the masterclass, Stijn. I think people have a good idea on how to go about the ingredients.
Can
Let's have
I
a
can
look
I
at,
quickly add one more
yeah,
thing though?
of course,
On
of course.
garnishes, I think what is very important with garnishes is that you don't just throw anything on your drink. If it does not add to the drink, if it doesn't make sense to the drink, if you have a drink, for example, that has no orangey flavors or orange compatible flavors, it does not make any sense to me that you would put the peel of orange in your drink or a dried wheel of orange on the drink. So if you do use garnishes, make sure that they are compatible with the drink that you're making. It's not there to look good; it has to be complementary. That's
Yeah,
what's important to me, I think.
good finishing point. Yeah, definitely. I've been in many bars, and garnish can also be a spray of odor that adds to the experience, or a smoking bowl, which makes the presentation very elevation. But it always adds to the flavor experience. And the reason, of
Exactly.
course, why you drink a cocktail is you want to get all the flavors in, same as why you drink a wine. Thank you
That's
for
why you
that.
go to a restaurant for good food. It has to be.
Exactly.
It has to make sense.
Yeah, let's go to the third part of our masterclass. That is mastering actually your technique, which is crucial to craft a nice cocktail.
Absolutely.
So we actually already dove into the shaking part. We already had a talk about that one. So, and you also already mentioned the importance of ice.
Yes.
You mentioned that the dilution, of course, the cooling down. Why is it that we want to have a cool cocktail and not, let's say, a room temperature cocktail?
Well, temperature, every drink responds differently in terms of flavor to room temperature. What does that mean? Flavor is dependent on temperature. Let's say, for example, you have fruit and you smell that fruit, but then you put that fruit in a frying pan and it's going to smell very differently just by heating it up. And by making sure that you have a drink that's cooled, you get a balance between the different flavors. You don't have the alcohol of the drink that's going to come at you straight away. Alcohol is a very volatile compound. Alcohol is something that comes off very easily as soon as you heat something with alcohol in a pan. Let's say you're making a sauce, a classic French sauce, let's say a vin champagne sauce, which is made with cognac. As soon as you put the cognac in there, the alcohol is what's going to be in the room, and everybody knows that you're cooking with alcohol. If you make a fish sauce with a pastis, the Marseillais, the anise drink from Marseille in France, everybody knows, not because of the flavor, but because there's been alcohol in there. Everybody has something like, woof, what's this? So by adding ice, you temper the alcohol first and foremost, and you get more equality between the ingredients. As you undoubtedly know, there is a very big difference between an alcohol of 40% and 20%. It's only 20%, but it's a lot. So that's why whiskey is a lot stronger than a port wine, but also in how they behave when they are at room temperature and you mix them. The 40% drink is going to come off much stronger. And so by chilling, you temper that and you create much more balance. That's the first thing. The second thing with ice, I've already mentioned, is that it helps you bind those ingredients together. It's almost like in a sauce where If you need something in a mayonnaise, it's fat and it's water. And you need something to bind those two together. In a mayonnaise, it's going to be the mustard. That holds everything together. Here in a drink, it's going to be the ice that creates the bond between the different alcohols. That's really going to create an equal feeling in the mouth. It also helps you with the texture. Ice has a certain density. If you chill your drink down, you have drinks with different textures. You get a uniform texture in the mouth. And that's very important to create a nice drinking experience.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
Does that mean that ice should be always in the drink? No, not necessarily. For example, if you look at a martini, the best martinis are without ice, but your glass is going to be ice cold. You're going to have it stirred with ice so it's cooled down enough. But then the drinking experience itself, you want that texture without ice getting in the way. Sometimes you want to have a nice big chunk of ice in your glass. Also important, more ice is better to keep your drink cooled. Certain bars have these big glasses with a long piece of ice in there. It's not just show. The colder your drink is, the more it's going to stay cold and the less the ice is going to melt, but it's going to keep your drink cold for longer so you can just drink longer. So if you do use regular ice cubes, more is always better.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's also the difference between crushed ice, ice cubes, and big ice, which you are talking about. Because, for example, a mojito can be made, well, it's actually a mojito because of the crushed ice, right? And it's a very different
Absolutely.
experience drinking a mojito on let's say on one rock of ice. And that's for us very, very
Absolutely.
weird to experience.
Again, there the crushed ice is adding to the texture of the drink. You have a lot more surface area, so it's going to dilute the drink quite fast, but it also brings a certain thickness to it because the ice is melting, but it's not melted all the way through when you drink it. So you create that a certain texture, which is what's being created by that crushed ice. Not every drink can use crushed ice because then you over dilute or you get a weird texture. I mean, try making a Negroni with crushed ice, and it's not going to be a nice drinking experience because the way the air in your mouth when you drink, the way you savor a drink in the mouth and that texture is going to create something really weird. And certain things are going to be highlighted where others are going to be diluted or muffled away, and you don't want that. You want to make sure that your drink is nice and balanced. So it's very important to look at what type of ice you're going to use where. If it's for shaking, always use just regular ice cubes. They're big enough. The big ones are too much work and too expensive to deal with. And crushed ice, you don't get to shake with crushed ice because it just disappears. And then you get a very watery drink, and that's not what you want to have either.
Oh, it's almost like putting snow in a
Snow cones
can.
can be great, but not in your drink.
Okay, great. So that's a very important pointer about ice, and I think definitely something that a lot of home bar enthusiasts or starters don't really know much about.
If you're really nerdy, by the way, if you're really into the how and why of things, there's a great book called Liquid Intelligence. You'll have to find it secondhand on eBay or in secondhand bookstores if they come across an example of that book. That guy explains everything and does the B testing of why you should do certain things a certain way. It's really nerdy, but it's really cool. It shows a lot of techniques in depth. So if you're really into the deep end of mixology, that's the one book that I can recommend to everyone. Liquid Intelligence. Liquid Intelligence.
Okay, cool. Hey, and maybe for the people at home, if you want to experience a Negroni on a big rock of ice, a Negroni without ice, and a Negroni on crushed ice, please do experiment on that so you actually understand what is the difference, because it's super easy. A/B testing. You can easily make a Negroni. It's always 3 ingredients with the same amount. You can use, of course, instead of a vermouth, a port wine, a Tawny Port, for example, which I highly recommend. And then you can make the 3 different drinks, and you can definitely understand why you need to pour it on a rock ice glass, because it will enhance your experience of the drink incredibly.
Or even if you don't have a big rock, you can taste the difference between one ice cube and a glass full of ice cubes. In my opinion, the one full of ice cubes is always going to be better than just that one tiny cube that's going to melt away and ruin your drink.
Yeah, definitely.
So a different technique that is also important to talk about is stirring. Stirring is, you can just do this. That works. It works good enough. But there's, I've been taught this method and it's something that works, but I kind of hold my two upper fingers in front of the spoon and then the other two go in the back. And what you try to do is actually you try to create this movement. You pull and you push, and that way
Okay.
you stir your glass, you make that pull-push movement. For me, that's something that I've been doing since I was taught this technique. It's something that works. If you go on YouTube, most people will explain it in a very similar way, but that's how I've been pushing and pulling my ice cubes around in the glass. That really helps you stir. Just to be sure, I always tend to hold my mixing glass so I don't just accidentally push it off somewhere. And it looks good if you do it this way and smile at whoever's in front of you. But that's also a technique that I find quite important to master. You could just use a regular spoon and just mess about.
You stir in the end, you stir, but it's about the technique that you stir does give a little bit of a different. And you always stir on ice, or is it always something that you can choose, or it depends on the drink?
I always stir on ice because most of the drinks need that chill, need that dilution. By stirring a consistent way, by doing it the same way every time, you know what the result is going to be.
Yeah. That
doesn't necessarily.
Do you count your ice cubes you put into the mixing glass, or
more is better?
Okay,
more
so
is always better.
Okay.
I always try to fill it up as much as I can, simply because more ice is better. Keeps it, first of all, it chills it down faster. It doesn't dilute too much. If you don't put enough ice in, it's going to melt faster. If your ice melts faster, you're going to have too much dilution. So by having a good full glass of ice, it's going to give me much more consistency. The movement is going to create friction that's going to lower the temperature in the glass. It's going to melt a little bit of the ice, but by having enough ice in there, the temperature is low enough that not all the ice is going to melt and dilute too much.
Okay, good point. And let's have a little look on the topic about the egg white that we use, because some of the port wine cocktails that we have created for the book are based on egg white, which creates a foamy layer.
Yes.
And it's not necessary, what I understand, but most people, they do talk about dry shaking to create foam. For the vegans, there's also an alternative, which you don't use egg white. I need to check for it.
Did you ever see the movie Cool Runnings?
Me? Cool Runnings?
Cool Runnings was a movie about the Jamaican bobsleigh team.
Yeah, this one. Yeah,
Jamaica bobsleigh. Yes, they did have a bobsleigh team. And one of the guys had a lucky egg. So he had the egg with him, and whenever it did not break, they would kiss the lucky egg. If you have eggs at home, great. There's two techniques to separate the yolk from the egg whites. Either you pour it through your fingers and you hold the egg yolk in the fingers. The egg white is going to seep through, and then you can separate it that way. Or you break the egg and then you pour the yolk from one side to the other. The white is going to come out. Make sure there's no shells left behind. But the easiest way of all is you go to the supermarket, you buy yourself some egg white in a can. It's been pasteurized. It's easy to work with. You just measure out how much you need. No big eggs, no small eggs, always the exact quantity that you need. But eggs are a fun product to work with. Dry shaking is controversial in the sense that so many people have so many different ideas on how to do it. Some people say, just pour it in your tin and shake. Others say, pour it in your tin, add one ice cube and shake. Others say that it doesn't matter at all, just pour everything in and shake. And that makes it difficult to know what the truth is and know what works for you. What I have found to work for me is that I shake my whites with one ice cube, because that one ice cube is going to help create friction. And that friction, it's almost like a whisk.
Yeah.
If you just take a whisk and you start whipping egg whites in a bowl, what you do is you add air to it, but it's also you add air because this is creating a lot of air. If I use one ice cube, I create that friction and it's going to help me shake that egg white around a lot more. So for me, that's what I do. It's what I found that works best. I shake my my drink with the yolk, one ice cube. I shake it really, really well. Instead of doing this, I go really hard on it. Just to get that friction going, and that's what's going to create the whipping. And then when that's done, I add more ice cubes, shake it another time to really cool it down, dilute it properly, and then I strain it. I pour it into a glass.
Okay.
So it's an essential part of the Camino Pelo d'Oro, for example, the egg whites. It's an essential part of a classic port flip. To have that egg white in there. Many sours can be made with the egg white. But if that's not your forte, if you feel like, fuck this, it doesn't work, I don't enjoy the mess that the egg whites create, just get yourself some magic foam drops. There's several brands that have it. Dr. Yanni's is one of those brands. Nomus has a foamer. There's so many brands all over the world that create a vegan, vegetarian foaming agents.
Yeah.
It's going to help you create that foam. But I must say that the texture of the drink is not exactly the same. There's a difference in texture that the egg white, the actual egg white gives you, that the foam drops do not have, in my opinion. But it does look nice and it's vegan friendly. So that's got that going for it.
Is the difference more that the cohesiveness of an egg is stronger, so it's more thick in the mouth?
I think so. Yeah, I think when you have a whipped egg white, it has a certain flavor, a certain texture. Also, you use a lot. There's a lot more of that egg present in comparison to a couple of drops. So that does create a texture that is very hard to replicate and imitate. They're getting close. So let's say in a couple of years, they're going to be almost same.
Same.
But in my personal opinion, if you can do it with egg whites, do the egg white. If you feel like your foam is not good enough, shake more. Even use one drop together with an egg white to get it going. I feel like it just looks nicer. It tastes nicer. A port flip with the drops is just not as nice to me than the one with the egg white.
Okay. Well, let's dive into the next part of our masterclass, and that's actually the mixology. Let's have a look at how to play with port wine. We talked about it already, and maybe you can explain to us why it actually is that port wine, doesn't matter if it's a white, a tawny, or a ruby, why does it actually play so well in a cocktail?
It's the flavor profiles that it has. Port wine is a complex wine. Port wine has depth of flavor. Port wine has acidity. Port wine has, especially the red and the tawny, has that a little bit of those tannins. Not that much. When you talk about the tawnies, there's the oxidative layer from aging in barrels that creates another dimension. So with port wine, there's so much that you can play around with, that you can choose to accentuate, which is a fun part, because you don't always, when you make a certain drink, you focus on what you want to accentuate, what you want to focus on, what you want to bring out of a certain drink.
Yeah.
With the Salsa Ruby, for example, I played on the fruitfulness of the Ruby port.
Ruby.
With the bridge builder, I played on the herbalness of the white port that I found, especially in the blend series. You have a certain sweetness, have a certain acidity that's going towards lemon, but there's also some herbalness that's running through. And that's what I wanted to accentuate. So that's how you can look at how you want to build a drink. You try the product, you taste, you figure out what's in there, and then you figure out what's gonna complement those ingredients.
And is
And
it
that's
also
how I played.
is it also true that when looking at the key ingredients of a cocktail, which are, for example, acidity, sweetness, alcohol, water, what role do you think port plays in that part? Because actually port, except for the water, is actually all these three already, right? It has the acidity, it has the sweetness, and it has the alcohol, which is way higher than our standard red wine. So how would you say that these ingredients in any port wine already add to the basic ingredients on any cocktail?
Well, in most cocktails, you have that present in a certain way. For example, a Negroni, classic example, has vermouth. Vermouth has a higher alcohol percentage, has a wine base, and then some herbalness. Well, if you look at a tawny has the wine base. It starts from a red wine, basically, that's been stopped in the fermentation. Then you have the complexity and the herbalness, I would say, from the oxidization, from being in a cask for X amount of time. And then you have that acidity that's really going to cut through the Campari, and that's going to make this a really good alternative for vermouth. Yes, why hasn't Negroni been vermouth? Well, because Italy's been a country that has had vermouth as I said, going back to Roman times. So Campari's been there. It's a bitter. Of course, a Negroni is going to have been invented in Italy, but that doesn't mean that we cannot play around with it. It's why port is so exciting and so interesting. It has those same qualities, and you can substitute, you can play around with it. Sometimes you highlight different aspects of a certain drink by changing one or two of the ingredients. By substituting port into most drinks, you create something new, something exciting, something you haven't tried before. And also, I have to say, you have to play around with it, because not every tawny port, not every 10-year-old tawny port is the same. It all depends on the cellar master, on the winemaker, what they try to accentuate. Some like the oxidized profile a lot more. Some like to keep more on the dried fruit flavors. If you know that's the flavor profile, then it's going to be much more suited for this cocktail rather than another. And that's what makes it exciting to use port. There's so many differences, and that's every time you use a different port, it's going to create a different cocktail, even though it's the same recipe. And that's the fun part, why I think port is such a good essential cocktail ingredient that we have been overlooking, and that bartenders around the world are starting to discover. There is so much versatility in the flavor profile of a port itself that you can easily play around with it and create new things.
If people would really like to start on their own to become mixologist, like a home cook, you just look at your closets, your refrigerator, maybe try to mix stuff up and try to put it in a pan, and you're cooking something new. Even every day, something never the same. How much pepper, how much salt, how much herbs. If you would look at a mixologist, where would you say a basic mixologist, a home mixologist, where would they start in this process?
That would be the very classic port and tonic. It's so easy, everybody can do it. You start with some white port, you start with some tonic, and you finish with either some herbs or the zest of a lemon. Very simple, very easy, idiot proof. That's been the success of the gin tonic, especially around 10 years ago here in Belgium. We had a massive gin tonic hype, because at a certain point, people realized that they can make a cocktail bar or fine dining style drink at home. And there's so much flavor that they could discover by changing the gin that they would use, changing the tonic that they would use. Start with that. Very easy. It's a long drink style cocktail. So that's very easy. You fill a long drink. This is a long drink glass, and I'll let you guess why it's called long drink. You fill a little bit of the port at the bottom. You top off with the tonic. Obviously, before you put anything else, put in your ice all the way to the top. You put in the port, you put in the tonic, you finish with either some mint, either a sprig of rosemary, the zest of that you peel off of the orange. And that's the easiest drink that you can make with. And then you get to play around. There's a thing called cocktail bitters. Cocktail bitters, this is a small example. The most classic one is called Angostura. That is basically the seasoning of bartenders. You have it in different flavors, different expressions. The classic Angostura is a flavor that is being sold all over the world, from supermarkets to high-end liquor stores. You'll find it everywhere. Add in a drop of that. Add in a drop. See how it changes your flavor. And that's how you can start at home. Start with simple stirred cocktails. By stirring your cocktails, you don't need that much equipment. You can stir a cocktail even in this glass. You don't need to invest too much. You already have most of the glassware at home. Stir. Make a Negroni, for example. It's 3 ingredients. You stir well, you strain into another glass, and you can enjoy. That is how I would start your into the world of mixology.
Okay.
Those are easy things to do. It doesn't require much equipment that you don't have, and it's going to open a world of flavor.
Sounds easy enough and delicious.
Absolutely.
At the same time. So do you have a balancing formula that you use or that most bartenders, like mixologists, use to create evenly balanced drinks?
I'm pointing at my tongue because that's the device that we're using. Of course, we have experience, and the more things you try, the more things you taste, the more you understand what is good and what isn't, and why things work and why they don't. Everyone is going to have to calibrate their device themselves. By experience, obviously, we know what is going to work, and sometimes it's a matter of a couple of milliliters to getting things right. We kind of know that if I use port as a base and I want to accentuate the oxidative flavors of it, I'm going to go for something that's been oxidized as well, like a long aged whiskey. That's going to complement that part. If I want to go for something fruity, I'm going to have to go look at something with syrup, for example, to enhance that fruity sweetness. But finding that is experience. You have to try, you have to taste, you have to taste consciously. If you make a drink, think why it could work. And if it doesn't work, understand why it didn't work. And the best way to do it is, okay, I've tried this and I feel like the whiskey is overpowering. Then maybe I should try it again, but do less whiskey. And that's how you try and find your balance. Is there a golden rule to it? Probably, but it's up to experience and flavor profile and taste that you've experienced in the past, and that's what you build on continuously. It's like cooking. I mean, everyone that starts cooking when they're fresh out of high school and go live on their own for the first time, well, you're not as good as a cook back then as you are now, simply because you have much more experience cooking. And that's also the difference between a home cook. A professional chef has been doing this for years, day in, day out on a professional level. So they taste the whole time. They have the techniques down because they do it all the time. You have to try and find ways to create that experience at home.
Definitely. What also helped me a lot to understand flavors, because not all of us live in the kitchens. We have other things what we occupy ourselves with. But one of the things that really helped me is to understand flavors, in the sense that there's a lot of flavor wheels you can download. It's about flavor wheels on wines, flavor wheels on port wines, flavor wheels in general. How does your mouth react to certain kind of flavors? How does your tongue work? You said already oxidative. No, I'm sorry. Oxygen. Sorry. Oxygen is something that you get when you breathe a wine. For example, a wine sometimes needs oxygen to open up. And all these things, they add up to the experience of the flavor. And yeah, for people that want to start off and explore their mixology side, I would definitely recommend to find some flavor wheels to understand the connection between flavors, and also to understand what flavor profiles are out there, because many people don't know that there's a lot of stone flavors out there. When you talk about wines, it's very normal to talk about a stone flavor, and everybody said, but who eats stones? Yeah, nobody eats stones. But when it rains, there's asphalt and there are stones outside. You smell something, and that something comes off of stone. And if you can memorize these flavors, if you can find them in products, then you can easily match also these flavors together and create like a dish for yourself.
Exactly. And it's about understanding flavor. If you try something, try to memorize what that flavor is. Try to memorize what works and why something could work with something else. We do it with our food every day. We know that certain flavor profiles work. Tomato and basil is a good combination. We know that works. Tomato, oregano, basil get you a delicious sauce already for your pasta. We know some of these profiles because we've been eating them for our whole life. But then if you try rums, if you try whiskeys, if you try liqueurs, if you try other wines, be conscious of what you're tasting and understand, or try to keep them in the back of your mind so you can pull from that library and say, okay, I want to create a cocktail from scratch. I have port wine. Now, where do I want to go with this? And that's been the idea that I've had, for example, for the Salsa Ruby, the cocktail that got me to the finals in Portugal. I started with trying the blend series red port, and I figured out that there's some sweetness in there that would pair really well with chili pepper. If I had the chili pepper, there's a chili pepper liqueur. There's a bit of sweetness in there. It's too much sweetness. How do I balance that sweetness with a bit more acidity? Where can I find the acidity? You can look at different ways of acid. You have vinegar, you have apples, you have limes, you have verjus. They're all acid, but it has a different acid profile. And that's how you start thinking and create something. Like, I need something to balance things out. How am I going to do it? You could pour vinegar on everything, but vinegar is not a nice acid. Although sometimes if you have fruit, sugar, and a little bit of vinegar, it creates an interesting shrub. So that's how you build layers of flavor. But you have to have that somewhere in the back of your mind that you can pull those flavors from and see what works and what doesn't. And that's how you experiment, you try, and you end up with a drink that gets you to a cocktail finals.
Which, by the way, is also in the book. You can find it in the book as well.
It's been I started with that drink, and I think I've made 20 or 30 different versions before I ended up with the one that got, simply because there was always something a little bit off. I had too much chili pepper. It was too strong. It was not sweet enough. It was too acidic. There was too much herbs that I had in there. So I tried to really balance that out, and that's by trial and error. If you use classic recipes like in the book, they've been tried and tested. All the bartenders that have participated have sent you recipes that are tried and tested, and they work. If
And what I hear you say a couple of times is that maybe we cannot find the perfect basic formula, but the balance is the magic word in both food. And if a food is not balanced or a drink is not balanced, you will either have too much sweetness, it will be like 2 bites and you're done, or it's too acid, you'll be like, oh, this is not nice to have in my mouth. But these things apply to all dishes and drinks. So what are they actually? Can you maybe help the people at home to understand what are these basic foundations you build something on?
Well, you have the basic flavors that are in the mouth, right? You have your sweet experience, you have the salt, you have the umami, you have that whole drawing that we saw back when we were in school of the different zones on the tongue. It's about making sure that it's not just one thing. As you said, it needs to be balanced. Balance can come from different things because, for example, a brand like Campari is bitter, but they balance that bitterness by adding sweetness to it. If you want to put that in a drink mixed with something else, you need something to cut through it. So that's the success of a Negroni. You have some herbalness and maybe some citrus tones that are cutting through nicely. With the Verjus, you add some fruitiness with a wine base that has some acidity as well. So you create a drink that has a good balance between herbal, between bitter, between sweet. That's where you find that golden spot of flavor. It's all, that's where I think the magic lives. It's about figuring out why you think something is too sweet and what can bring that. I'm not going to say the sweetness itself, because sometimes sweetness is not necessarily the amount of sugars, it's the perceived sweetness. How you can bring the perceived sweetness down, how you can bring the perceived acidity down, because if you try a lime just on its own or a lemon on its own, you're going to have a lot of acidity. But if you use that and balance it out in a drink, let's say, for example, a margarita is a good example of a lime-forward drink. It's mostly lime. It gets balanced out by the grassiness and the alcohol of the tequila, and then the sweetness of a liqueur. And that's how you can look at port wine as well. You start with port wine, and then you can add lime to port, and then it will be too acidic, and then you can see, how can I balance this out so that acidity and the sweetness finds each other. And that can be through a liqueur, that can be through a syrup that can be through a shrub. It's about finding where you can reduce the perceived bitterness, the perceived sweetness, the perceived acidity down by bringing something else up.
Last thing I want to talk about this mixology part. What we see happening in the world of mixology is that alcohol has been a talk point for the last 20 years. Wine has suffered massively because of this. Wine, unfortunately, as well. We see an uprise in mocktails. We see an uprise in alcohol-free wines becoming better and better and better. One of the reasons why I believe that port wine can work well within cocktails is not only because of all the flavors, but it's also because it's a low ABV drink. So it means if you have a strong forward cocktail, which is made up out of some liquors that are maybe 30, 40, 50% on ABV, port wine can be a substitute for one of these liquors and create a lower ABV. How do you look at the role of this ABV inside of classic cocktail recipes, but also in newly to create cocktails?
What I think is exciting about the low ABV cocktails is that port is a stronger bodied wine. That means that if we are going to create a low ABV drink, it's still going to hold enough of its body. It doesn't get diluted too much. Whereas if you would use a regular wine at 12%, you lose everything. There's not much of that body left. There's not much fruit. kick left. There's not much sweetness, the acidity, it's all gone. Where with port wine, there's some amazing opportunities. What I've created recently was a cocktail here at home where I used a white port with an rum alternative, and it was absolutely delicious. It was a spiced style rum, so it had some herbalness to it. It worked really well with the port. Added a little bit more acidity of this mixer, by the way.
Yeah.
And that gave me a very delicious, easygoing drink that was low in alcohol, but still had something that is that you cannot imitate with the alternatives. The thing is with alternatives is that people always go into that alternative and try to find the real thing, whether it's soy milk that people are, well, this is not milk. No, it's soy milk. You should look at that with the alcohol alternatives as well. The rum, the whiskey, the gin alternatives, I would call them. They should not be looked at as an alternative. They should be looked at as a different flavor category. It's another tool in your kit to create drinks with. And if those products are tasty and work well with port, then by all means go for it. It doesn't have to be whiskey, it doesn't have to be gin or rum or a liqueur to create a delicious drink. There is no alternative for port wine, and the flavors that port is going to bring to your drink are going to stand out no matter what you're using as other ingredients in your drink. And that's why port is so exciting in the low ABV cocktails, in the classic cocktails. No matter where you want to use port, it's always going to be an exciting drink to work with.
Okay, thanks. We can finish this last segment. Well, we talked about it a little bit already, but I do believe that it has a strong value, and that is the presentation of your cocktail. Looking at
Absolutely.
the glassware and the garnish.
This, for example.
Yeah, long drink.
Let me get a couple of glasses from the cupboard. First of all, can we agree, by the way, that even if we drink port on its own, it should not be in a tiny, tiny glass, but it should be treated like a wine? And can we agree on that? So we have to have good wine glasses for our port. Let's start there.
Yeah,
Even without adding anything to our port as a cocktail, port should get the respect it deserves and get the glassware it deserves. That's one thing.
I recently talked to Axel Probst, the German port wine expert, one of the most respected port wine experts in the world. Actually, he read my book, and he gave me a couple of pointers that I could improve on. And one of them was, he said, like, can you please add to the port wine drinking experience that it always supposed to be at least 200 milliliter glass. It doesn't have to be that the port wine you pour is 200 milliliters, but the glass itself has to be at least 200 milliliters because it needs room, like to breathe, to give you all the aromas. And unfortunately, I completely see what you mean. A lot of people pouring a very tiny little like aperitif glass full of almost until the edge full of port wine, and it's like you're ruining it.
Exactly. And that's also one of the reasons why I think that port has been ignored and misunderstood, because if you drink port that way, you don't get the wine experience. You get the alcohol comes first. It's not going to be nice.
Nope.
Drinking port wine should be fun. You should be relaxed. You should be at ease, and you shouldn't be thinking about the alcohol in port or the things that do get the room to come up. Whereas in a bigger glass, the port has the time to settle itself, and all the flavors are going to come out balanced, which is what the good glassware does. And that's the same for cocktails. You need to have the right glassware. Certain cocktails taste different in different drinks and different glassware.
Yeah.
And that is also the reason why there's a lot of different brands of glassware for wine. Wines respond differently to different glasses, and so do cocktails. A long drink, which is usually a very easy going cocktail, not too many ingredients, not too much complexity. For example, a port and tonic, a long drink glass like this one is perfect. You have space, it's narrow, so the bubbles in the tonic, for example, don't disappear straight away. You have air that are taking the subtleties of your drink away, and it's just easy to drink from, easy to hold, nice to look at. A second glass that I find very important that you have is going to be this one, the rocks or tumbler glass, whichever you want to call it. And that is going to be good for cocktails that are stirred, like a Negroni, for example. Some shaken cocktails, margarita style, I would call them, are also very good in a glass like this. You can do a dirty dump. A dirty dump means that you shake and you pour with the ice from the shaker, or you can strain over fresh ice. It can go both ways, but it's really nice to have it in there. Also, your flips, for example, you have a nice wide rim with the foam. It just looks a lot more stunning than if it would be cramped in here. Although if you would go for a column where a gin fizz, for example, has the foam coming out of the glass, there you need that small one, so it comes out nicely because it doesn't have space to go anywhere except up. It would not look nice in a wide glass. So thinking about your glassware really depends on what kind of drink you have. For the bridge builder, for example, I used this glass because the drink itself reminded me of the grandeur of James Bond, where you have the martini, the classic martinis. This is a martini style glass, as they would call it. You put the drink in, it looks clear, there's no ice, it's classy, and then I put in a little skewer with a toasted grape on it. So that made it look absolutely amazing. Whereas in a glass like these two, the grape would be lost and the garnish would not serve the purpose of elevating the drink. So it's really about experimenting. But of course, sometimes when I'm home and I just want to drink, I just take whatever glass is available and don't really think about it too much. But if you want to present it nicely to your guests and think about what goes where, you need to think about your glassware as well. The Camino Palo Duro, for example, I had a Nick and Nora glass, which is a glass with a stem that was a little bit wider, so I could really make the cocktail shine. You saw at the bottom, you saw the foam layer on top from the egg white that I used, and that made it look really nice in the glass. Not too far from the edge, so you wouldn't dip your nose in it when you were drinking. So that all made sense, but it's about preference and aesthetics, and you should sometimes just try and taste the difference, because a Negroni in a glass like this is not as nice as on a big rock of ice in a tumbler glass.
And sometimes even the thickness of the glass makes a lot of difference, because sometimes I drink a foamed layered cocktail and it's so difficult. For example, a Port Star Martini. I call it Port Star because one of the cocktails also is made on a port base. But because of the thinness of the glass, it becomes so shaky in your hand. So it's very easily to spoil actually over your glass. Whereas you take a little bit of a bigger coupe glass, you have a much sturdy hand grip, and you can just take it on your lips, and you don't spoil the drink. So even those little details make a lot of difference in how you experience a drink.
Absolutely. I was going to add to it by saying, like, a glass like this is a big, thick piece of glass, and if you fill this up with ice, it's going to keep your drink cool because of the thickness of the glass. It doesn't have much of an exchange with the environment it's in. However, a glass like this is going to be a lot thinner. So before you pour your drink in, you need to either chill this glass, put it in your freezer. That would be best if you don't have space in your freezer, in your fridge. If you don't have that, then you can cool it by putting ice in it before you make your drink. Pour the ice out and then pour your drink in. So that means your glass is going to be chilled. It's going to stay cooler, because otherwise you do all the effort of making a drink, chilling it down, diluting it to the right temperature, and then you would pour it into a glass that's warm. So you kind of undo the work you just did. So make sure that the glassware you're using is appropriate. So martini glasses, Nick and Nora glasses, I would make sure that they are cooled down, either fridge, freezer, or add ice before you make your drink. With these glasses, you can kind of get away with it by adding ice to it. You can add ice to it, and that's gonna keep the temperature low enough so the temperature of the glass would not have an effect on the drink. But yeah, cooling your glasses or adding enough ice. Again, ice is one of the main ingredients in your cocktail. Don't skip on the ice.
It's a very good point. Of course, it's mentioned in the book as well many times. The ice part, definitely something that when you're new in the mixology or bartending world, you don't really understand that so much. But as you move further along the road of experience and testing other drinks, you understand that ice is the crucial ingredient.
But that's the fun part about home bartending. There's nobody watching you. You can do whatever. You can do all the A/B testing that you like. You can try 2 different glasses. I mean, these are similar, but the experience that you get from the glass is very different. And that's what's very exciting about being a home bartender. You get to play around with it, you get to create, you get to test, you get to fail sometimes, but it's fine. You still get an okay drink out of it, and that's still a win because there's no pressure on your back to create the perfect drink every single time. Being a home bartender is definitely a fun position to be in because there's no rules. You can only win. You can only win, and by trying as much as you can, you'll see what the difference is, and you'll become better faster than you even can imagine.
And just to look at the garnishing for the last part of our masterclass, there's a lot of things that you can do. For example, you can use a skewer for your drink. For example, you'll use a little burnt grape. You can use the very sweetened cherries. Sometimes you put the cherry on a foam layer. Sometimes you put it on a skewer. Sometimes you put a rosemary fig on top. Sometimes you drop something down into the drink. So in the end of your drink, you can actually eat the part that is left over. Are there any things that you would say like, don't do that or really do that about garnishing?
Make sure that the garnish makes sense. What do I mean with that? If you have a cocktail and that has no orange or orange flavors, do not use an orange if it doesn't add to the cocktail. Sometimes it can be very distracting having conflicting flavors in the garnish. A garnish should not just look good, but should also make sense or add, whether it's in the smell, in the looks, it should add to what's already in the cocktail. If you have no herbalness in your cocktail, then there's no reason to add a sprig of rosemary in the cocktail. If you have some herbalness and the sprig of rosemary adds to that herbalness, then by all means go for it. But as you said, you can do very different things. You can use a skewer like this. If you don't have skewers like this, you can just use a regular toothpick to put something on, put it in the drink. You can put it on the side of the drink. For the salsa ruby, for example, I've put it on the side of the drink. That was a chili pepper that I rehydrated in a port syrup. So the simple syrup we made earlier, instead of using water, I used port and then used that to rehydrate the chili pepper, rolled it up nicely so it would add something visual, but it also, taste-wise, it was somewhere in between a raisin and a chili pepper, so it kind of made sense with the drink. I had a drink made from wine, port wine, and a chili pepper liqueur. So that it makes sense, but that's definitely something you can play around with. If you have, for example, a flip, one of the garnishes you could do, or a drink with some egg white in it, make a little meringue. Sometimes the meringue can be made with, you can add flavor to meringue. It's not just the egg white that you dry or bake. So you can play with that as well, but it has to make sense. It has to add flavor-wise, olfactory. It needs to make sense to what you're doing in the glass. That's my advice when it comes to garnishes. And when it looks good, it looks good. So you can do it in or on top of the glass. It just have to make sense.
Sounds like it's sounds like a lot of sense. I think we've covered most important parts of mixology, the glassware, the garnish, ice. Definitely had a look at flavor profiles and how you as a chef mix that and use that knowledge to your advantage in creating nice recipes and cocktails. We checked the bar tools that you can use at home or that you can buy as an addition to your already existing kit. Yeah, and I think the ingredients speak for themselves. When you try good port wines, if you have not already, then you will be amazed about the quality, the story behind them, and the flavor profile that you can get with them.
Go to your local liquor store, go to your local wine merchant, start up a conversation about you're interested in port wine, you like port wine, start talking. They are more than happy to help you out. That's the best advice I can give you. Supermarkets, some will carry some good wines. I have found some surprises once in a while. I found the 1999 Quinta dos Malvados vintage in a supermarket in France. So sometimes you get surprised, but those
But then
guys
you already
don't
know
usually...
where you're looking for.
Exactly. You can be surprised, but the issue is that most of the people there don't have the time to really figure out what's in their store or have the knowledge to give you the device you're looking for. So your local liquor store, your wine merchant, they are going to be the best step to help you forward as well with the mixology part, because they also know much more about the the wines. They can help you set up with the mixology basics, the tools that you need. They're going to be your best friend going forward.
Definitely. And from my own experience, if you want to start off, become a port wine drinker in the sense that you want to experience not only the cocktails, but the port wine as well, definitely get yourself an LBV, which is a late bottle vintage. It's a really affordable way of getting into the depth of what a vintage style port wine actually can be. And also put in your bucket a 10 or a 20-year-old Tawny, which will show you the aging process of what happens to port wines when they are 10 to 20 years approximately in barrels. And that gives you a really good idea as well. If you have the budget for it, treat yourself to an aged white port. You will be blown away by on port wines, which personally my favorite. And that leaves me to say, like, all the people that are watching this masterclass, it will be available for the Kickstarters. First of all, we will share it later on as well on the YouTube channels. And if you haven't already, and you really want to start by creating port wine cocktails, then I can recommend either to download and buy the ebook that is going to be available in the end of this year, 2025, or get an a copy of the port wine cocktail book called Crafting Port Wine Cocktails by the Portologist. And you will find 3 recipes of Stijn, which are really accessible to create. You do have to do some work to recreate those recipes, but they are and there's a lot of basic knowledge in the book as well. We talk about all the stuff that we talked about now as well, and you will go to be able to make more than 55 recipes on port wine cocktails. So check it out. I will share with you the links in the comment section on YouTube, so you can find those as well. I will also, if you're in Belgium, invite you to visit the restaurant where Stijn works. It's called Dapper.
It's in the football stadium of AA Ghent, the team of the city of Ghent. You have amazing views over the field while dining, and we're very happy to welcome you. And of course, if anyone has any questions, you can always find me, send me a message on Instagram. I'm very responsive. At Heart of Agave is where you can find me, and I'm happy to get in touch with you and all questions that you still have after this masterclass.
Definitely. And last thing, you're wearing a really nice sweater, #PortGeek. So if you want to post your cocktail recipe or your craftsmanship, doesn't matter if it's about port wine, of course, but it would be nice. You can always use the #PortGeek, and you will find some other port geeks in the world as well, sharing the same crazy knowledge.
Absolutely.
And
we all share a passion for port wine, so we're more than excited to see the creations that are being made with port wine, or even the regular good port wines that you've been drinking. Doesn't necessarily have to be cocktails to use the hashtag. Just it's all about sharing the love that we have for this product.
Stijn, thank you from the bottom of my heart. It's been a pleasure working with you and sharing the passion between us and your knowledge. Thank you again for sharing your recipes.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for letting me participate in the book. It's an honor, and I'm really excited to see everyone else's recipes as well. I cannot wait to hold that book in my hand.